Now, for the much more interesting part, how to actually abuse elites in this game, how to just make them a complete joke, when you realize there are so many things you can do. There used to be a big focus in the mod community on this because it's super funny, but you can actually just, like, jump over a lot of attacks. For instance, like, on Storm Vermin, if they do just a standing attack, you can just, not a running attack, a standing sweep. You can just jump over that attack, like not have it do damage. For instance, that. See, it didn't consume any stamina. I can do it unblocking too. It just won't hit me. Yeah, like that. You can just jump over attacks. Oh no, you can jump over those too. Yeah, you can jump over those. I wasn't actually sure. I never try to jump the running attacks. And then the funny thing is, you can do the same thing to the Chaos Warrior on that standing sweep attack. Oh, I canceled his attack. But you can just, Oh, I need to show a jump, don't I? The scoop, you cannot do it on the scoop. Be careful about that one. But this standing attack, not that one. The slower one, which one day will happen, no doubt. Right there, you can just jump over it like that. Look at that. Bet you didn't know that. Because it doesn't look like you can jump over it, but you just can jump over it like it's not there. Can't do that to the overhead. 99% sure you can't do it to any other attack. And then one more thing about jumping in this game is you can actually jump out of a lot of hitboxes. You can jump over monster attacks. I don't know if I'm going to show that. I guess I should show that now that I said it. But hook rats are another one. If a hook rat tries to, if you're on high ground, like if you're ever on a really good example of this is on a fence. Maybe that's a better spot to show this because there's a lot of fences in the game where the cool thing about fences is you can always get around enemies as long as, they're not actively climbing over the fence and blocking your path. And so there's a lot of spots where you can use fences to run away from dangerous areas, but one of the things is, like, well, hook rats are still going to try to hook you, right? And you can actually really easily avoid hooks by jumping while you're on a fence. Like that. You just jump over them. It's a little hard to do this consistently, but it is something you can just get away with when you're on high ground. What a motherfucker, man. This is the most annoying fucking rat ogre I've ever seen in my life. Get the fuck off my porch. But, why? Oh, God, by third person. This video is absolutely munted. But yeah, there. See, you can jump over that attack. The slam, you can't jump over that, but you can jump over the sweep. Slam has a lot of distance, but the sweep attack you can jump over. Same thing for chaos spawns. You can jump over the tentacle grab. As long as it's not the slam, you can jump over it. For Minotaurs, I don't. By the way, Minotaur attack 3, when it's doing the running attack, the Minotaur won't hit you on the third attack, like ever. That's just broken. Not even gonna bother showing it. You literally just won't get hit by a Minotaur on its third attack. It just doesn't hit you flat out. I don't think you can dodge anything by jumping for Minos. And for, what's the other monster? Storm Fiend. Yeah, you can dodge a Storm Fiend swipe by jumping. Bile Trolls, you can also dodge, as long as it's not the overhead. And now for the coolest part, elite move tech. Oh, by the way, you can jump over, like, normal attacks. Like, if an SV does that swiping attack I jumped over earlier, it's super easy to do the jump when you're on high ground. Same thing with the Chaos Warrior. Next, I want to talk about a lot of move tech in the game that, for some reason, I haven't seen a lot of people use or take advantage of, and it's really the enemies in this game. Most enemies in this game have a form of move tech they can give to you. One of the best and underutilized is definitely just warp fire throwers. There's a reason I don't like killing warp fire throwers. It's because you can basically just use them to get around the map or around enemies if you need to. For instance, if you just jump, like, you can just get sent across the map. Like, you can get through enemies doing this. Another funny one, I'm not going to show it, is assassins, but if assassins hit your teammate, right, it pushes you. If you jump, it can send you really far, so if you're, like, standing by a cliff, that's why you don't want to jump normally, just randomly, because if someone next to you gets assassined, you'll get sent off. But you can do this intentionally. Maybe it's your friend, maybe you just don't want to revive them. You see them about to get assassin, just jump and it'll push you away. Give you a good excuse not to revive anyone if they ever ask. Rattling guns are also good move tech. By the way, if you ever get in a spot where like you turn a corner or there's a rattling on you and you want to get away from it, it's really helpful to just jump. And it's like the worst thing you can do is just like hold block and slowly move if you're getting rattlinged from up close. If you just jump, like it'll help move you further away. Like much better than just holding block and doing nothing. For move teching with Chaos Warriors, you can just like if you jump and intentionally get hit, of course it would be that attack first. But if you're like a two-hander and you're like, how do I deal with Chaos Warriors paths? Like there's so many Chaos Warriors, you can just jump randomly, and any of these hits is gonna move you really far. So like intentionally letting them hit you while blocking is a really good way to deal with these hordes as you're kiting. If you're low on stamina, especially the kick attack is really good, jumping late with this one. And it just gives you enough time to generate stamina. Like for instance here, by the time the rest of the patrol gets on me, I'm gonna have like full stamina again. And so if you do like these sorts of jumps against them intentionally, on their kicks, on their punches, on attacks like that, it's gonna make your life a lot easier, especially if you have a low move tech weapon. I'm hoping I can get it to kick me eventually, because that sends you really far when you get kicked. Yeah, like that. You just jump. Very good way to deal with Chaos Warriors. Just constantly jump when you're around them if you're trying to, if you want to get pushed away from them, and makes fighting them so much easier. Alright, so the first thing is there's a lot of objects in the game where the Blightstorm or Vortex can't pass around it, and pretty much all objects that have collision will have this property. The most common one is definitely trees. So I can just show that here. If you're just like, there's a Blightstormer in front of you, you can just make it have to reroute around a tree. Sometimes it, especially on larger rocks, it can't even go through them. And so you can just like completely dodge a Blight by doing that and get it to split. This is really useful if you're like, there's a big circle right here, you like can't pass. You could just go around a tree. There wasn't a tree right here, for instance, but like over here. And you're probably like, who cares? That's super obvious. I think most people already knew that, but it happens in a lot of areas people don't realize. Like this is gonna be a more clear example of that. Like this tree here, there's like a Blight. It couldn't pass. It slows down. So you can use sides like that if there's a Blight in your way. And even in enclosed areas, which I'll show, you can do this too. And the other cool thing about this is usually it's still wide enough to capture, you know, the enemies in it while you avoid it. And so it can do a lot of damage to trash and elites, and then you can just avoid blights. And then lastly, even objects that don't look like they're gonna block blights do, like this fence here. At first, when the blight goes through it, you think like, oh, it's gonna expand around it, but it doesn't. It has to shrink to go through the entrance. And so you can always like get around these things, kind of just by watching where they're going, even if it's a really small area. Like over there, it can't even get me. So there's a lot of things you can do to basically never have an issue with blights. And then lastly, a common mistake you'll see is blights actually don't really have... They have infinite vertical distance, so if a Blightstorm is below you, it will like immediately get you because the vertical distance, as far as I can tell, is infinite. Maybe it's not actually infinite, but it's definitely higher than this, for instance, where it seems like it's casting on the floor. It doesn't really redraw the circle because the circle stays at the level it was casted, but the actual effect goes upwards. And so even if you don't see like the little green lines around you, if a Blight's below you, it'll still reach you. Alright, on my favorite map, on my favorite class, here to talk about my favorite mechanic in the game, criticals. The crit system in this game, by the way, the crits are not completely random in this game. It's not statically random, where like if you have a 15% crit chance, that doesn't mean every hit you're doing has a 15% chance. Although on average, 15% of your hits will be crit. Think of it like a ramp-up system, where after you get a crit, your chances of critting are lower, and then every time you don't crit, it gets higher. And that distribution was set up to ensure that the static average, like 15% crit chance, still means you're going to have 15% of your hits be a crit, but it means they're usually spaced out, and that kind of means your swift slaying is going to be easier to maintain, because if you imagine like being on 5% crit chance with swift slaying, that sounds horrible. But at least with this system, if you don't have crits for like 10 hits in a row, well, your crit chance is going to be pretty high by then. And There's some modded Discord math on that if you're actually interested. But the real cool part is crits don't just increase your weapon damage. I don't know if you know that. There's other things in this game, like how many enemies can you cleave through? Crits do not affect that. If you crit, you do not hit more enemies. However, there is a different sort of effect, which is stagger. How does stagger work? Well, crit actually increases the amount of stagger you do. One of the really cool things in this game is that works on pushes too. Pushes can be criticals. I don't know if you knew that, but you can get criticals when you push. And when you get a critical and you push, it actually does a lot more stagger. For instance, if I just spawn, no chaos allowed on this beach, not on my beautiful rat-infested beach, one of these storm vermin, right? Normally you push an SV trying to overhead you, and it's not going to do anything, right? Can't push it. Oh, see, I just got a crit. Try to push, doesn't do anything, but I'm on fervency here. Let's just make it do a normal attack, right? Pushing doesn't do anything. Fervency's up, I'm gonna crit. And look at that, staggered. So when you crit, you can stagger a lot more. Unfortunately, you can't really predict when you're gonna crit unless you're on, this thing. But that is something to keep in mind. If you do play fervency, your crits will basically stagger everything. So the more you know about my favorite class in the game. Alright, now here's something that's mostly related to the modded realm, but it has some relevancy to official as well. It's how do you pull enemy aggro? What I mean by that is when you have enemies in this game that are part of the map that aren't spawning due to an event or, the regular horde pacing you get in this game, how do you activate them? Well, the most obvious way is you simply walk near them like this. You don't attack them at all. See, they are attracted to the beautiful, dear old Bright Wizard here, and that is how they activate. But there's two effects to actually you can look at. One of them is the type of enemy. That is it Chaos or Skaven, so Beastmen and Norskin or just Skaven, because the aggro system works differently actually in those cases. The next one is what type of weapon are you using to gain aggro? Different weapons will have different radiuses at which they can pull aggro. For instance, black powder weapons are a lot more than crossbow, and Sienna staffs will be more than a crossbow. For instance, if I go on to Witch Hunter Captain here, my favorite class in the game, and I pull out my old crossbow, and I go and I shoot a crossbow down there. What do you think's gonna happen? You hear anything? Nope. This thing has a very small radius. It's very bad at pulling things, but if I switch over to our little old black powder weapon on Kruber, shoot it over there, you hear the enemy's voice line a bit, because I just aggroed some of them with this shot. Or did not. What a fucking terrible demonstration. None are down there. Unlucky. I got the worst seed, but if I shoot like right here, see, activate that one. If that was a crossbow, would not have pulled it. But you see, that stuff down there did not activate at all, right? So if I switch to something with a bigger radius, for instance, Sister Staff lifting, if I lifted that little enemy who aggroed with the staff, right, not left click, if I lift it up, it will pull a lot more enemies because the Sister Staff lift has a big radius, but the biggest radius is the Grudge Raker and the Coruscation Staff left click. If I'm on Koru and I shoot that same spot I just shot with my handgun, what's going to happen is almost everything in this radius is going to aggro. You can see all the way down there they're getting aggroed, and if I just shoot it a little bit further forward, it's going to be enough to aggro pretty much everything. You can see enemies that were even on the other side of the map now wake up and start aggroing towards me, because the Koru staff in this game has a massive radius. If I just shoot down there as well, you can see just how many enemies I'd managed to aggro with this thing. That's because this weapon has a really big radius. Like, that stuff that the handgun wasn't able to pull, this pulled. So the Grudge Raker works like this, the Blunderbuss works like this Koru staff, and Sister Staff is pretty close, kind of, I would say about halfway between the black powder weapon and the shotguns. And then the crossbow is very low. The conflag is pretty high. I think it's about the same as a black powder weapon, but I'm not exactly sure. It might be slightly more. The next thing to understand is Skaven enemies aggro to you a lot easier. The Chaos enemies sometimes are brain dead and they just won't aggro no matter what. Usually when there's Chaos enemies, you have to aggro them, by specifically aggroing the elites, which doesn't really make sense. So if there's like 6 marauders standing around, and then there's a chaos warrior or a berserker or a mauler, if you shoot or aggro the chaos warrior, the mauler, the berserker, it'll activate kind of all that trash in that area. That's not the case for the Skaven, where if you just like go in the general vicinity of trash, it'll activate. But on the chaos ones, you kind of need to activate the elites to wake up the trash, which doesn't really make sense. And also sometimes they just kind of go brain dead and you can't activate them no matter what.